Hi everyone! Today we're going to be reading the story Me, Jane by Patrick McDonnell. The genre of this book is a biography. That means that the author of this story wrote about another person and their life events. So based on the cover of this book, using the illustrations and the title, what predictions can you make about what the story will be about? Okay, so before we read, let's think about our listening target for today. When we listen to the story, we need to be thinking about how our personal connections to the story help us to understand what's going on in the story. So let's read and figure out more about Jane. Jane had a stuffed toy chimpanzee named Jubilee. She cherished Jubilee and took him everywhere she went, and Jane loved to be outside. Have any of you ever had something that you cherished and that you took everywhere you went? Turn and talk with your neighbor and discuss some of these things. Okay, well, I heard some great discussions going on about our personal connections, so let's read and figure out more about this story. She watched birds making their nest, spiders spinning their webs, and squirrels chasing one another up and down trees. See the squirrels going up and down the trees? Jane learned all that she could about the animals and plants she studied in her backyard and read about in books. What do we think that Jane might be writing about or drawing in her book? Does it look like she might be writing in a journal? Let's see if we can figure it out. This page looks like it has a lot of her journal entries. I notice over here that she has some drawings that have brains of the different animals and even a person or a man and where his brain is according to other animals. Also, we see that she's drawn and colored with watercolors the picture of a bird. And she even created her own society or club called the Alligator Society. So what do we notice about all of these pictures that has to do with what kind of a person Jane is and her interest? One day, curious Jane wondered where eggs came from. So she and Jubilee snuck into Grandma Nut's chicken coop, hid behind some straw, stayed very still, and observed the miracle. It was a magical world, full of joy and wonder, and Jane felt very much a part of it. Now here is a personal connection that I made with the story, because I remember as a child always loving to go outside and lay out on the grass and just look up at the sky and take in the world and the surroundings. Have any of you ever done this before? Turn and talk with your neighbor and discuss some of these things. Let's keep reading and figure out more about Jane. Jane often climbed her favorite tree, which she named Beech. She would lay her cheek against its trunk and seem to feel the sap flowing beneath the bark. Now, some words on this page seem to be a little bit tricky, so let's go over what some of these words mean. The sap of the tree is the part inside of the tree that's kind of like how a person has blood flowing through their veins in their body. It's kind of similar to the way a tree has sap flowing through it. And then, of course, the bark is the part on the outside that's kind of rough that you've probably touched before, and it's been a little jagged. So we can imagine what it feels like on Jane's face when she's touching the tree. Jane could feel her own heart beating, beating, beating. With the wind in her hair, she read and reread the books about Tarzan of the Apes, in which another girl, also named Jane, lived in the jungles of Africa. Jane dreamed of a life in Africa too. A life living with and helping all animals. At night, Jane would tuck Jubilee into bed, say her prayers, and fall asleep. To awake one day to her dream come true. So, based on what we read, what are some of the things that we noticed about the kind of person Jane is? What kind of words would you use to describe Jane? Okay, so let's look a little bit more at the back of the book to see if we can figure out some of the things that the author felt were important to learn about Jane. So, Jane, when she was a very young girl, decided that she was determined to go to Africa and live and work with the animals and even write about them in her journals. Everyone told her that it wasn't possible and she could never do it except for her mom. Her mom pushed her to raise money, and eventually she was able to go to Africa and even create her own organization called the Jane Goodall Institute. This organization helped communities near the wild places grow more food, have clean water, and send children to school, while also teaching them how to protect their nearby wildlife. So before we end, I think it's important for us to read a little message that Jane wrote and that was put in this book. Each one of us makes a difference. We cannot live through a single day without making an impact on the world around us. And we have a choice as to what sort of difference we make. The life of each one of us matters in the scheme of things. And I encourage everyone, especially young people, to make the world a better place for people, animals, and the environment. Thank you for reading with me this book, Me, Jane. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.